Good morning and welcome to TVP World News. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk will set out the key goals of Warsaw's presidency of the Council of the European Union at the European Parliament on Wednesday morning. Now, Tusk will members of the European Parliament that Poland wants to significantly boost the bloc's security. He will propose focusing much of the efforts on the energy, food, and health sectors. Poland's Prime Minister also wants to improve security along its borders, within its economy, and in the information space. The MEPs are due to debate Tusk's policy initiatives during a 2-hour morning session. Tusk will later on Wednesday visit Oslo for talks with Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre. The two leaders are due to discuss security issues, deepening relations between Europe and the U.S., and greater cooperation between Poland and Norway on energy and climate policy. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas will outline the bloc's biggest threats during a keynote address at the European Defence Agency conference. Now, Kallas will highlight the European Union's top challenges during her speech in Brussels. These issues include continuing support for Ukraine and its war against Russia, and potential challenges in the face of a reset in EU-US relations following Donald Trump's return to the White House. Polish Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz will later on Wednesday morning outline the defense and security policy priorities of Poland's EU presidency. The suspected sabotage of undersea cables by Russian shadow fleet vessels has shown the threat such clandestine operations pose to European countries. Now, speaking in the European Parliament, Poland's Minister for European Affairs and the responsible executive vice president of the European Commission warned the situation is urgent.
I would like to emphasize that Russia's shadow fleet does not only fuel Russia's war machine against Ukraine, but by circumventing the oil price cap. It also poses significant risk to the environment and maritime safety in Europe and globally with its inadequate maintenance and poorly insured vessels.
These events demonstrate the vulnerability of the critical infrastructure which we rely on for carrying data, gas and electricity. This must be seen against a backdrop of geopolitical tension and Russia's hybrid attacks against the EU. The damage of one single cable may not necessarily have a big impact in our telecommunications. However, the systemic disruption may cause several consequences for the affected regions and also the Union as a whole.
Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk is set to meet with the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, before setting out the key goals of Warsaw's presidency of the Council of the European Union at the European Parliament on Wednesday morning. And what we're seeing right now is live footage from that meeting that is about to take place just shortly.
Dodatkowych taryf i ceł na europejskie towary to temat numer 1 tu w Strasburgu i zresztą właśnie dlatego
So Tusk will be telling members of the European Parliament that Poland wants to significantly boost the EU bloc security. He's going to also propose focusing a lot of the efforts on the food sector, health sector, the energy sector. He also wants to improve security along its borders, within its economy, in the information space. A lot of debate is going to take place about Tusk's policy initiatives. And what we're seeing, of course, here on the live images, it's going to be a 2-hour morning session, after which later on Tusk will be flying to Oslo for talks with Norwegian's Prime Minister. And there we have it. What we're seeing right now is Polish Premier Donald Tusk meeting with Roberta Metsola, the President of the European Parliament. Greetings by the press in a 2-hour meeting that is set to unfold just shortly and momentarily.
Metsola, przewodnicząca Parlamentu Europejskiego, która jeszcze w grudniu była w Polsce wraz z przewodniczącymi frakcji politycznych, by zapoznać się z priorytetami polskiej prezydencji.
And there we have them going in. And the speech in the parliament will begin in about 30 minutes from now. Now we have it, Polish Premier Donald Tusk, along with the European Parliament's President Roberta Metsola, about to take the stage and give a couple of words, giving handshakes to the press. U.S. President Donald Trump says Europe should significantly boost spending on weapons for Ukraine because the war is more of a threat to the EU than America. Trump also said he would likely impose further sanctions on Russia if President Putin refused to negotiate about ending the conflict.
We're talking to Zelensky. We're going to be talking with President Putin very soon, and we'll see how it all happens. We're going to look at it very soon. One thing I do feel, the European Union should be paying a lot more than they're paying, because under Biden, I mean, we're in there for $200 billion more. Now, it affects them more than it affects us. We have an ocean in between, right? Little thing called an ocean. The European Union should equalize. We're in there for $200 billion more than the European Union. I mean, what are we, stupid? I guess the answer is yes, because they must think so. But the European Union takes advantage of us tremendously on trade.
United Nations Secretary General António Guterres will give a special address to the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. Now, on Tuesday, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky told world leaders and business figures that Europe needs to make itself a strong global player. Former NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg and Andriy Yermak, the head of the presidential administration of Ukraine, will later on Wednesday discuss how Ukraine and its international partners should proceed in 2025. Other debates being held in Davos today include discussions on the future of employment, prospects for emerging economies, and the threat of modern slavery.
We will need to work together.
Donald Trump vowed to hit the European Union with tariffs, saying that the EU treated the United States unfairly. Now, the U.S. president added that his administration is discussing imposing a 10% tariff on goods from China by February 1st.
We're talking about a tariff of 10% on China based on the fact that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada.
How soon on those tariffs?
Probably February 1st is the date we're looking at. The European Union is very, very bad to us. They treat us very, very badly. They don't take our cars. They don't take our cars at all. They don't take our farm products, essentially. They don't take very much. We have a $350 billion deficit with the European Union. They treat us very, very badly. So they're going to be in for tariffs.
Bracing for possible mass deportations that President Trump has vowed to enact, Poland's government has made sure that the country's consulates in the United States are ready. Now, additional consular services outside consulate buildings will be provided in case they're needed by Polish citizens.
Following initial announcements from the incoming U.S. administration concerning the deportation of illegal immigrants, I've asked the foreign minister to prepare Poland's consulates and diplomatic posts and personnel for the possible consequences this move will have as it applies to Poles living, working, or currently staying in the United States, whose visa or legal status may vary, so to speak. The new administration has not provided information on the details of the operation, so we don't know whether it will impact Polish citizens in the United States. Regardless, we must be prepared for all scenarios, which is why our diplomatic posts in the U.S. will reach out to Polish citizens who are concerned about this situation as soon as possible.
Compatriots living abroad whose passports have expired are invited to obtain new documents. In the U.S., we are also establishing additional consular duty outside consulate buildings. It is also worth doing so in order to be able to vote in the Polish presidential elections.
After calling for it earlier on Tuesday, the Slovakian opposition withdrew its no-confidence motion against the government headed by Prime Minister Robert Fico, vowing to launch another at a later date. Now, Fico responded to the motion by calling for a behind-closed-doors discussion of the proposal, as well as a recent report from the Slovakian Information Service. Our Franciszek Pilis has more.
The call to topple the government came after Prime Minister Robert Fico supported a comment by MP Tibor Gaspar, a member of the same party as Fico and the Prime Minister's security expert, saying that Slovakia should be ready to leave the EU and NATO. That, combined with Fico's visits to Moscow and his disappearances on so-called vacations, led the opposition to launch the vote, saying they don't trust the Prime Minister with their future. Fico responded with a call for a non-public discussion of the proposal, including a debate on the recent Slovakian Information Service report, which, according to Slovakian news agency TASR, alleges that the Slovakian opposition is seeking to destabilize the country as part of a long-term organized influence operation.
All 71 MPs in the opposition signed the initiative to have this session of the parliament to discuss the vote of no confidence. It was started today and proceeded then to take a very strange turn whereby Prime Minister Fico announced that he would only be willing to continue in a non-public session. This never happened in the history of Slovak parliament.
While Parliament was debating the motion to oust him, Robert Fico was busy meeting with his Hungarian counterpart and fellow Moscow sympathizer Viktor Orban, who was visiting Bratislava at the time. The opposition aren't the only ones dissatisfied with Fico's rule. Over 250 Slovakian psychiatrists and psychologists recently wrote a letter to the PM asking him to resign, calling Fico's political behavior and public statements a threat to democracy in Slovakia.
There is a very open and public discussion about the fact that his coalition may not last until the end of the full legislative term in 2027. So nobody's ruling out possible early elections. And of course, with pressure and cracks piling up, we can expect further weakening of the government.
Despite not reaching the necessary majority to pass the proposal by just a few votes, the opposition has vowed to launch another no-confidence motion in the near future.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban visited his Slovakian counterpart Robert Fico in Bratislava on Tuesday to discuss energy policy. Now, both leaders had strong words for what they see as a belligerent stance from Kyiv after Ukraine halted the transit of gas coming from Russia.
Perhaps this is the right place to say that the manner in which the Ukrainians have refused to negotiate a settlement is quite simply unacceptable. Aggressive and hostile statements are coming from Kyiv, and this is not the way to resolve these issues. I would like to point out that Kyiv no longer sits so firmly in the saddle that it can afford this behavior. I think that we share the same view as we claim that the decision will not only damage Slovakia in terms of transit fees, but will damage the entire European Union, including Hungary, because it will increase the burden of rising energy prices in Europe.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is set to meet with French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris on Wednesday. Now, the two will reportedly discuss the U.S. president's threats to impose sanctions on the EU alongside other issues. Now, Scholz and Macron are expected to call for a quick response if the U.S. follows through on threats to impose tariffs on European exports, despite the leaders' policy differences and recently weakened political positions. As he took over the U.S. presidency, Donald Trump reiterated a call for the European Union to buy more American oil and gas if the bloc wants to avoid tariffs. And moving on to sports, in tennis, Poland's Iga Świątek powered into her second Australian Open semifinal with a 6-1, 6-2 center court rushing of 8th seed Emma Navarro. Now, the world number 2 has moved one step closer to ending her title drought at the Australian Open after wrapping up a straightforward but controversial quarterfinal win over Navarro. Now, it came as video evidence suggested she failed to get to a mid-rally drop shot before the ball had hit the court for a second time. Navarro questioned the umpire immediately after Świątek had later hit the winner, but the American's decision to play out the point meant there would be no review. Świątek will now face American Madison Keys, against whom she has a 4-1 win record.
Game, set and match center. 2 sets to love.
And that's all for this edition of TVP World News. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.